Montreal, Quebec. Beautiful, complex, unique. The energy of here hits different. Everywhere you look, history collides with imagination and creativity. La Q. Let's dive in. All right, so as a host at Much Music, CBC, and Hockey Night in Canada, I've been so lucky to experience firsthand this amazing country and so many of its storytellers.
I'll just keep moving
But I've always wanted to go on this journey across the country, diving deep into our stories. And if we're honest with each other, we know that this country is in complicated times, and there's a lot to focus on when it comes to our division, but there's also a lot about common bonds. So let's explore that. The invisible glue. The things that bind us together. Because our stories, right now, have never mattered more. In Quebec, stories have a split identity. They do belong to a wider Canadian tradition, but they really represent a culture that's purely Québécois. It's produced some of the world's greatest storytellers.
Un film que j'adore beaucoup, c'est de Denis Villeneuve. Dans le fond, c'est le film Incendie. Ça m'a marqué énormément.
La grenouille et la baleine, la guerre des tucs.
La guerre des tucs.
La guerre.
C'est pas une raison pour se faire mal.
Exact.
I caught up with an old friend, Montreal writer Justin Kingsley, to ask why stories here are so compelling.
In English Canada, we didn't get access to a lot of Quebec shows, but we certainly knew Quebecer cinema was something else.
Yes.
Obviously, Denis Arcand, the Lumiere brothers, the first time they ever screened a film in Canada, their first film, it was in Quebec.
Cinema from Roger Frappier to Denis Arcand to Denis Villeneuve that you grew up with. That's almost insular.
Talk about the impact Crazy had and Jean-Marc Vallée.
You talk about Crazy, that's a great movie. It's entertaining popcorn. But you come out of it changed. You come out of it wanting to explore, asking yourself, maybe it's your relationship with your father or your mother, or maybe it's your relationship with the world, but it made you think. That's it. It made you think. We often talk about the two solitudes.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than two solitudes.
Yeah, the English-French. I mean, here we sit in Quebec right now.
It's a lot more than that.
Yeah, of
It's a
course.
lot more than that, because I'm a Francophone from Ontario. But sorry, I'm getting a bit flustered here with your aggressive move on the chessboard.
I play chess the way I live my life.
Okay, I should have brought a helmet.
Now it's a ground game, and I love a ground game.
Yeah.
Check.
Bastard. Something happened in recent years where I was disappointed in my country. Like, I stopped wearing my badge, you know what I mean? Realizing the awful history we refuse to acknowledge and all those things.
Yeah.
And it's only recently in the last year I've started feeling those feelings again as deeply as I have.
That's why we're making this show?
Absolutely.
That's why we're making this show?
Necessary. Check.
Oh, tabarnak. One of the things about driving across Canada is there's so much empty space here. There are long stretches where there's seemingly not a lot to look at, but in actual fact, that is the country that we love. You see all the little nuances. We kind of have it all here in this country. All. It's one of the beauties of a coast-to-coast-to-coast reality.
Next stop, Caraquet, New Brunswick, right on the Acadian Peninsula. It's a place that possesses its own unique character. The unofficial ambassadors to this amazing place are Jean-Marc Dugas, a stand-up poet, and musician Jean-Pierre Morin. Jeep and Johnny, tell us about this place.
Some people call it the Acadian capital. It's a long history of Acadian people living here. There was no reference when I was young to see Acadian people on TV, no.
I don't remember seeing anything that was from around here where people spoke like with Acadian accent or anything like that.
I watch a lot of TV shows from Quebec.
Which ones did you watch?
La boîte à surprise, Vobino,
Sans les gobelets.
It's the fact that we are a minority, and the Quebecer and the Acadian. I think the position of a minority, it's a force, a strength for the people, it's for sure.
Something to celebrate.
Yeah, and I love the saying when The best way to protect your language is to learn another one. So to open, you have to protect your culture, but at the same time, you have to open up to other culture.
When people talk about the stories that matter to them, children's shows come up a lot. Here in Fredericton, Renata Solano, a 15-year-old from Mexico originally, knows that all too well. And like a lot of kids who come here from other places, it's those shows that provide a way into a new culture.
Freddy's nice because it's small, community-based. Everyone speaks French or English. And there's also like other cultures, but it's cute because it's like small but big enough for there to be, yeah, like stuff. Yeah.
So you play soccer and you're in musical theater?
Yeah.
And you paint?
Yeah, a little.
Yeah. What don't you do?
When I moved here back in 2013, I would only watch Spanish cartoons because that was my first language. But my mom, like as a teacher, she was like switching it to English. And I started watching Arthur or Franklin or like Roly Poly Oly, Max and Ruby. Max and Ruby, Ruby and Max.
But not just English, also French, right?
No, yeah. So then I watched Passepartout, and then it got the vocabulary to like get easier.
So as you got older, what did you start watching?
I watched like 16, a cartoon, anime kind of, but for older kids.
I love you too, guys.
What we're learning as we go across the country is that, especially with shows that were for younger people and for kids, is just how impactful they were and the kinds of lessons they taught.
Like, there's a good book that it's like everything I learned in kindergarten. Yeah. And those shows kind of remind me about that.
So when you're on the pitch, which TV shows are you taking with you?
Franklin, it kind of just goes with the flow because sometimes I do overthink when I'm playing. Yeah. And then I have to like remember that, not be like Caillou and just start crying on the field. Calm down, Caillou. It's not that deep.
You think that just was relatable for some people?
I guess, like some adults now, maybe they watch Caillou and maybe that's why they're like this now.
What Canadian TV shows did you watch growing up?
As a kid, Mr. Dressup, I think everybody would say Mr. Dressup.
Yeah, Mrs. Dressup.
Mr. Dressup.
Mr. Dressup. Mr. Dressup was my favorite. Casey Finnegan, obviously Mr. Dressup. Love them.
How encouraging and positive the show was for me growing up as a kid, and it really encapsulated a lot of what I consider to be Canadian values.
Ernie Coombs, Mr. Dressup. That show ran for almost 30 years, and for millions, it taught us more than school ever did about kindness and imagination. This is Victoria Pike. She grew up a superfan from St. John. She wound up working on the documentary, Mr. Dressup, The Magic of Make-Believe.
It is very clear that lots of shows that we all loved, we loved collectively, we learned some lessons, and there was a lot of entertainment value. But Mr. Dressup comes up as something a little bit more than that.
I agree. It's something that I think all Canadians recognize. Mr. Dressup was accessible from coast to coast to coast for free, provided you had a television set. You could get the CBC.
That's right.
And it was on every single day. He just embodied kindness and compassion, inclusivity, and being a welcoming human being. It was really ahead of its time, I think. Like Judith Lawrence, who was the puppeteer of Casey and Finnegan, was paid the same amount as Ernie Coombs. They made Casey a bit gender ambiguous. It was never directly mentioned if they were a boy or a girl. It was just whatever the child projected onto Casey.
I mean, even now that's considered provocative based on the current conversation.
Right, but it was never talked about. Like from my research, it was never a scandal. People just accepted it. They didn't make a big deal out of it.
Right. When we're going across the country, a lot of kids shows get mentioned. Like a lot of kids shows get mentioned. What is it about the Canadian kids shows, even above and beyond Mr. Dressup, that you think are so powerful?
Our Canadian identity, you know, when you think of what does it mean to be Canadian, well, my first reaction is we're polite. We're polite and we're kind and we're welcoming. Is that because 5 generations of Canadians were watching these shows like Mr. Dressup that promoted kindness and promoted being welcoming and inclusive and accepting?
I find that really compelling, this idea that a country put kids first in their programming. That's beautiful. There's lots of time to be entertained, you know? We are currently on an unmarked boat on uncharted waters heading to an undisclosed location to visit a man who has seen all of it from possibly the highest vantage point You can imagine. One of the great Canadians. We're going to go visit Chris Hadfield.
Welcome to my cottage.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to see you.
How are things?
Been okay?
Yeah, great. How are you?
Good. You've been traveling.
A lot. Yeah.
A lot. I grew up here. I was born just upriver. Summers were always here. And so this place was really important to me. What I got through the arts, what came through movies, and what came through television, they took the horizons of this place where I really grew up and showed me the edges of possibility of just what might happen. And they intersected actually right here, because it was on this island in a cottage not too far from here, where I actually watched the first 2 people walk on the moon. So it couldn't be more appropriate of a place to think about my own particular journey as a Canadian learning about the world.
You're watching TV, and all of a sudden, your entire trajectory is sparked.
The imagery was important, but the portent of what that meant and the way that it changed my own understanding of what might be possible in my life, that all came to me through a television the summer that I turned 10, right in this place.
Unbelievable. This is the thing about television and film. It can completely change a kid's life, completely change their trajectory. Stories are how we figure out not just what we are, but what we could be.
Yeah, when someone really makes the effort to eloquently and vividly tell you a story that's important to them, it hits you differently.
Right.
And that's why television or movies done right can be so impactful.
When you were in the space station, did you watch shows?
I'm a big fan of Hockey Night in Canada.
Yeah.
So one of the few downtimes on the space station was while I was exercising. And the Leafs were nice enough to actually take just a pure cut of the game without the commercials and everything else and send it up to me as soon as the game was over. And then I would tell everybody, don't tell me what the score was in this game. I don't want it to be spoiled. So I even had Hockey Night in Canada on board the space station.
That's amazing. The power of that broadcast. It stays with you.
Yeah.
If we had traveled across this country and tried to tell this story, no matter which decade you picked from the beginning of broadcasting, there has been no greater gathering place than Hockey Night in Canada. That's the point, is that it's been every decade. There's no broadcast equivalent to this anywhere in the world. I stand by that. The closest thing you can compare Saturday nights to is going to church. Even they know. How about other shows that you used to watch religiously, let's say Saturday nights?
Hockey Night in Canada, La Soirée du Hockey.
It started at being very young. My grandfather and my dad, I loved to fall asleep to the sound of them going, "Oh!" every now and then. George? Would you join us on stage tonight?
Feels like an intervention. I got very uncomfortable for a second. To do what?
To play keyboards in the hockey song with us.
Nothing would make me happier. Well, so what are the chords?
So, you know, it's just that da 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 da.
The great Ken Dryden, writer, politician, Hall of Fame Habs goaltender, once said, "Hockey is not a game of control. It's a game of managing chaos," which is also not a bad way to describe being Canadian. It's a wild and strange experiment, this place, a place where cultures can be distinct and still belong to a greater whole. Our stories make managing our national chaos possible. And like the game so many of us love, it teaches us important lessons about how to be our best selves.
Jamais pratiqué la chanson avant. George Stroumboulopoulos, everybody.